the Watchdog on Wall Street podcast, explaining the news coming out of the complex worlds of finance, economics, and politics, and the impact it will have on everyday Americans. Author, investment banker, consumer advocate, analyst, and trader, Chris Markowski.
All right. And I know I've talked about this quite a bit over the years, and why not break this down? I talked about the fundamentals last weekend's program and the need to continually work on the fundamentals. And I don't know what it's going to take. I don't know what I have to say sometimes here on the program to finally get through to our listeners when it comes to certain topics, and no matter what it may be, rip-offs, scams, doesn't really matter. Go through a litany of things. I don't know what it's going to be. I've often described my plight and what we do at the Watchdog on Wall Street radio show, podcasts, and Markowski Investments as a Sisyphean endeavor where I am constantly pushing the rock to the top of the hill and having it roll down on me time and time again. It's okay. It's okay. We're going to keep pushing the rock. I want to talk a little bit about student debt and the origins of student debt. What's kind of funny is that, like most problems we have, major problems in America today, they're not Mother Nature. They're things that we do to ourselves. How's that? We are oftentimes, I know it's an old saying, cliche, whatever it may be, we're our own worst enemy. We are. We try to fix problems that really don't need to be fixed. They will fix themselves on their own if you just get the hell out of the way. And we got all these well-intentioned do-gooders out there that look to fix things and they make things worse. Anyway, story about this in the Wall Street Journal talking about how broken our student debt system is, how bad the crisis is. Borrowers currently owe more than $1.5 trillion in student loans. Now, I saw this coming a long time ago. It was most certainly was put on steroids during the Obama administration when the government decided to take over the entire industry. That's an average of basically that $1.5 trillion is an average of $34,000 per person. More than 2 million have defaulted on their loans in the past 6 years. That number grows by 1,400 a day. The federal government has now acknowledged that taxpayers stand to lose $31.5 billion on the program over the next decade, and the losses are growing rapidly. It's going to get much, much worse. At the same time, 4 in 10 recent college graduates are in jobs that do not require a degree. Many American colleges are dropout factories. More than a third of them, less than half of the students who enroll earn a credential within 8 years. 1/3 of the colleges and universities here in the United States, less than half of the students at that third earn a credential within 8 years. What are we doing here? Well, so what should we do? Oh, more of the same. More of the same. We continue to shovel more and more and more money into this inefficient, ridiculous system. And the reality is more and more Americans are dissatisfied with it. College tuition has soared 1,375% since 1978, more than 4 times the rate of overall inflation. We spend more on higher education here than in any other country outside of Luxembourg, about $30,000 a student. While at the same time, you've got college presidents making a great deal of money. Why shouldn't they? They're running successful enterprises, are they not? They are. It's a business, and business is booming for many of them. So the question that the Journal asks, how do we get here? The student loan system built in the 1960s. This is on the belief that higher education is a safe and worthy investment for both society and the individual. At the time, first children born after World War II were beginning to graduate from high school and enter college. The American economy was becoming more sophisticated and knowledge-based, and education had been a key factor behind the nation's impressive economic growth and rising living standards, to say nothing of our standing as a global superpower. At the start of the century, less than a tenth of American workers had a high school diploma, let alone a college degree. By the 1960s, high school was universally required and college attendance was growing rapidly. Economists at that point in time started talking about college as an investment in human capital that drove wage gains for workers and raised the overall economy's productivity. Now, LBJ. I've mentioned here on the program that, in my opinion, LBJ was one of the most consequential presidents in our history, by far. The things that were done on his watch changed America drastically. During his administration, LBJ and members of Congress wanted to make sure that everyone shared in the gains, right? Previously, college had largely been confined to upper income whites. Now the hope, I want to talk about that for a second. I'm going to stop right there. Upper income white, I want to think about that. My aunt, very, very bright, God rest her soul, ended up being and having a very successful career. Didn't go to college. Anyway, I look at these things and I see certain jobs and I say to myself, and we've talked about this here on the program, there are other places around the globe that do things better than we do. They have apprenticeships. Talked about Switzerland. They know Swiss bankers, right? Guess what? Most of those Swiss bankers didn't go to college. They decided after high school that's what they wanted to do, and they went and they got apprenticeships at those banks, and they were taught on the job. Anyway, moving on. The hope under LBJ was that the colleges would level the playing field for minorities. They would also level the playing field for the poor and the middle class. It was quite clear to us, this is a quote, okay, this is David Mundell, who was a budget analyst in the Johnson and Nixon administrations. It was quite clear to us this was an economy that was screwing a group of people, or not helping a group of people it should be helping. Does that sound familiar? We hear the same thing today. Banks were reluctant to make loans to students who were viewed as risky prospects. I don't blame them. So what? So what? They are risky prospects. And if banks are reluctant to make loans to students, guess what? It keeps the cost of tuition down. But no. We got to get the government involved. We got to get the wizards of smart out there involved. And again, these people, what they do, the consequences, unelected more often than not, and what they end up coming up with, they never get hurt by this, but society does. Anyway, Johnson and his buddies pushed Congress to pass the 1965 Higher Education Act, which provided funding for the government to guarantee student loans made by banks. So what does that mean? What does that mean? Guaranteeing student loans made by banks. What did that do? That shifted the risk from the banks. Banks are like, this is freaking awesome, man. You mean to tell me I can make loans to people? I can make loans to all these kids going to college, all these kids, and I'm going to charge them interest on these loans, and I don't have to worry about them defaulting? That's freaking awesome, man. And that's basically what it was. Pretty good deal, right? Who is bearing the risk? The taxpayer. But Johnson didn't want to stop there. He wanted to come up with a longer-term strategy for financing higher education. So he and Congress faced a decision. Should the bulk of federal money go to schools or directly to students? Now, remember this name. This name's going to sound familiar to you. That question, of course, you got to get really smart people and economists behind this. Alice Rivlin. She was an economist in his administration. What do they do? What do they do in Washington? Let's put together a committee. Let's put together a task force on the issue. Alice Rivlin also became the first head of the Congressional Budget Office. She was Bill Clinton's top budget official and also the vice chair of the Federal Reserve. Again, think about all the positions that this woman's held, these high positions in power. And she got those after screwing up our entire finance system for higher education here in this country. So anyway, Alice Rivlin and her task force came down on the side of direct aid to students, which It's what? It's a voucher system. Same one we have today. Federal government gives students a combination of loans and grants. Now, the loans became an entitlement like Social Security, which students were free to spend at the school of their choice. In one of her last interviews before she died this past spring, Rivlin said that they expected this system to empower minorities and the poor. It evolved into an almost fixation among economists anyway, with the idea that higher education added to your future income, and therefore loan finance was a sensible thing. You could pay it back out of your future income. Companies can borrow to buy equipment. People ought to be able to borrow to invest in themselves. Now, this Rivlin report came out in January of 1969. This is weeks before the Nixon administration took over. The Nixon administration and Congress followed Rivlin's blueprint in the Higher Education Act of 1972. That act made permanent the government's role in guaranteeing student loans made by private banks. It also created Sallie Mae, a quasi-public entity designed to jumpstart the student loan market. What Sallie Mae did was it borrowed from the Treasury at low interest rates and then used that money to buy student loans from the banks, freeing up the banks to do what? Make more loans to students. What other quasi-public entity does that? With home loans, right? Fannie and Freddie. Well, wow, big government, right? Woo, look at all this stuff. What could possibly go wrong with all these super smart people in Washington, D.C.? What could possibly go wrong? A lot. The combination of open access to schools and open access to loans turned the higher education market into a version of the Wild West. It's from the Wall Street Journal. Schools of all types, banks, nonprofit guarantee agencies, and Wall Street investors competed for federal student loan dollars. In particular, the system gave colleges an incentive to maximize the tuition they extracted from students and the federal taxpayer by boosting fees and enrollment, which meant relaxing what? Admissions standards. The federal government didn't want to put in place any academic criteria to prevent someone from getting aid. The idea emerged that anyone who wanted to go to college should be able to. And I quote, "We didn't think about dropouts. They didn't consider the possibility that a large number of students would end up in debt without earning a degree or the higher wages that come with it. No, that's right, because we don't look at unintended consequences. Isn't it amazing? Isn't it amazing that you get these really, supposedly really smart, brilliant people, much brighter than all of us, that they're unable to take a couple steps back and take a look at what might happen? The unintended consequences of their actions? Well, they don't, and they don't have to. And I've talked about this great length here at the program, because what does it matter if they're wrong? If they make a decision that screws something up royally, what the hell does it matter to them? They're not going to feel any pain. None. No pain in their decisions. There was I think about that, it's popped in my head. Remember the James Bond movie? It was actually a remake of Thunderball, Never Say Never. There was a scene in that movie where they were playing a video game, and this is the 1980s. This high-tech video game. It was domination of the world or something like that. And as you're playing the game, and you're losing against your opponent, electric shocks would go through the controller of the game. So you would feel the pain of your soldiers out there on the battlefield. We live in a society and a country today where people have managed to basically remove themselves from anything bad happening with the decisions that they make. And this also happens in corporate America as well. Most certainly in Washington, D.C. Anyway, the voucher system that was put into place, nobody paying attention to it, no oversight. And listen, I could understand if they would actually look at things and say, you know what, we've got to come back and we need to reevaluate what we did a year from now, 3 years from now. And this is my opinion, where all government programs need to have an expiration date. They need to have an expiration date, like a carton of milk or anything that you would stick in your refrigerator. At some point in time, they spoil and they need to be renewed. We don't do that. Government programs, things that are started, end up becoming omnipotent. Anyway, we had all sorts of, and again, it's so easy to see the issues and the problems, the perverse incentives that this system that they created, what would come from that? Colleges could raise money by what? Admitting academically suspect students. What are the consequences? What are the consequences of letting kids into your school if you need to put butts in the seats and they can't make it? They can't cut it. It's just going to be too hard for them, right? Well, what are the consequences? Do the colleges and universities feel any of the pain? Do they have any skin in the game? No. Taxpayers do, right? Somebody drops out of college or defaults on their loans. What do they care? They still get their money. And years ago here in the program, we talked about this and how colleges and universities should be the ones that are issuing the loans. They're the ones that should have some vested interest in this. You know, it's amazing. After the financial crisis, you had part of the Dodd-Frank bill was to force some of these loan originators out there to continue to have some sort of skin in the game. Colleges and universities do not. So what happens? What happens when you have a system that all of a sudden is flooded with cheap money? What happens? Well, what happened back in the 2004, 2005, 2006, 2007, into 2008, when there was tons and tons of cheap money floating around with real estate. Oh, yeah, I'm going to go out and buy pre-construction condos, 5, 6, 7 of them. Yeah, I'm a real estate magnate. Right. How'd that work out for the country, huh? Well, it's any different right now with student loans? Tons and tons and tons of cheap money. So what do colleges do? That's easy. A lot of cheap money, we can raise prices. We can raise prices. Same thing that happened with real estate. Homes, and I remember this, cracking me up, where going back, and I was making fun of this stuff on the radio. Homes where I lived in Southwest Florida that were built and sold for $150,000 in a year were selling for over $300,000 a year. And I'm trying to get across on this radio show, does that make any sense? Does that make any sense at all? Oh, I know the real estate agents are going to tell you that real estate never can go down. It just keeps going up, 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 and up. And God doesn't make any more real estate, and some of the other crap that real estate agents tell you. Anyway, we told you it's wrong. Just like we're telling you what's going on with the colleges and universities is wrong. The prices are going up because the money is there. So what happens? Colleges raise prices. What does Congress do? Hey, we got to increase loan limits. We got to even throw more money at this. And this cycle continued through the 1980s, the 1990s. Sallie Mae and the private banks that fronted students the money for the federal student loan program made big profits. And guess what? All the colleges and universities are thrilled they made more money. And again, we've told you all the time, oftentimes here on the program, that colleges and universities, they've got nonprofit status, many of them, most of them. That's a joke. That's a joke. They're hedge funds, is what they are. They're hedge funds that have a nonprofit number. Anyway, by the year 2000, higher education, again from the Wall Street Journal, had become an opaque and dysfunctional market. Students and families have had to accept it as an article of faith that taking it as an article of faith, the journal says. What is that? What do we talk about here on the program? Conventional wisdom. And conventional wisdom is what? Poison. Taking on big college debt is still worth it. We got to still do it. Everybody's got to go to college, right? Only last month did the federal government release for the first time data showing the average debt burden of students leaving a particular program within a school. Previously, the government only published school-wide debt statistics. Now, what happened? What happened in 2007, 2008 when the recession started? What happened? Kids said, oh, hey, gee whiz, you know what? Maybe I'll just stay in school. I'll go. One of the dumbest things, I was railing against this at the time. Oh, the economy is bad. It's hard to find a job. You know what I'll do? I'll go borrow more money and stay in school. Keep the dream alive. Keep the party going. In 2007, there was a boom in college and graduate school enrollment. Hey, it's tough finding a job right now. I got a college degree and I don't really want to wait tables and bartend and wait this thing out. So instead, I'm going to take out massive loans and get myself more degrees. Barack Obama tried to address some of this higher education issues through what? Regulation. It put in place rules designed to force for-profit trade schools to shut down if many of the students defaulted on the loans. Only the trade schools, or only the for-profit schools. What about the nonprofit ones? But what did Obama tell everybody? Obama doubled down on the idea that college is a safe investment for students and the country. In his first speech to Congress, February 2009, he said his budget would invest in education in part through student loans, and asked every American to spend at least 1 year in college. Why would you just go and spend at least 1 year in college? Every American will need to get more than a high school diploma, he said. That is a crock of crap. But that was at the same time he was telling everybody that, we were going to have all of these green new jobs, right? New economy. And we're going to have green jobs everywhere. And everybody's got to go to college so they can be a part of this green new economy. Nobody even knows what the hell it meant. It just sounded good. It was pure rhetoric, sophistry at the highest levels. Yeah, Obama says I should go out and get more degrees out there. You ever think that maybe you can, go to a library, pick up some books, do some stuff on your own? Every American's going to need to get more than a high school diploma. Why don't you tell that to the contractors and the plumbers and the masons and many other people that actually make the country go round? Barack Obama and his administration cut out the middleman. They killed off the guaranteed student loan program, the one that was created under Johnson and Nixon that relied on banks. Did that in favor of a direct loan program in which money came from the Treasury. But of course, it's federal government, and they have a loose lending policy with very few questions asked. The Obama administration as well promoted the income-based repayment programs, which set borrowers' monthly payments at 10% of their discretionary income and then forgave a portion of their debt after 20 to 25 years of payments. This severed the link between the value of students' education and how much they could borrow, providing a huge incentive for schools to raise tuition, since taxpayers would pick up more of the tab. Enrollment in these programs is one big reason that the government's costs for student loans are exploding. Right. Well, let's take a couple steps back. The student loan system. Yeah, has it achieved some of the objectives that were set out by policymakers over 50 years ago? Yeah, more Americans gained access to college. The number of full-time workers with bachelor's degrees has risen from 7.6 million in 1980 to 19.5 million today. The share of Americans aged 25 and older with a bachelor's degree reached 34% in 2017, double what it was in 1980. The Education Department data shows all of this, and for the typical borrower, higher education is an investment that does pay off. It does for some. The amount of graduates earn over workers without degrees remains at an all-time high. About 40% of all student loan debt goes to finance graduate degrees, including law and medical degrees, which typically lead to higher salaries. Again, we get that. We understand that there's certain jobs out there that require this. But many groups right now are benefiting unevenly or not at all from college degrees. The extent of the returns depended on several demographic characteristics, most notably when people were born and their races or ethnicities. In particular, the financial benefits one can expect from a college degree appear to be lower among people born in the 1980s, and they remain unequal across racial and ethnic groups. The issue that I have that they don't differentiate with this is what degrees. What degrees? What are you studying? So what, you have a degree. What's it in? That's like saying I have a car, but there's a difference between cars, is there not? Bigger part of the problem is that millions of people took out loans but never earned a degree. And the high dropout rates continue. Many households and even employers now are starting to recognize that college, may not be worth it. You've got companies now, including Google, Apple, and IBM, have dropped the actual requirement that job applicants have college degrees. They no longer think that a degree is automatically needed to succeed. Okay, so now, the Journal asks a question, where do we go? And they say that members of both parties say that the system is broken. But they haven't offered anything in sort of a fix, right? You got Democrats out there saying, hey, it should be free. Government should directly subsidize public colleges, right? Elizabeth Warren out there wants to cancel up to $640 billion in student debt. Republicans want a system that would shift student loan financing to the private sector. Mitch Daniels, so we talked about Mitch Daniels and his program at Purdue University. He has got income share agreements in which students receive funding from investors to cover tuition in exchange for a share of their income for a period of time after graduation. Anyway, anything that's been brought up, is it really going to do anything to help people currently struggling under student loan debt? Yeah, unless you forgive all of the loans. Funny thing is that the Journal asked Alice Rivlin what she thought, this is before she died, what she thought about the system that she helped to create 50 years ago. Her response? We unleashed a monster. Yes, you did, Alice. And doesn't affect you at all, does it? Reason why I decided to talk about this, and we're going to talk about this again this weekend on the big radio show, is, and the Journal misses some aspects in their column as well, is what the hell are you studying? What the hell are you taking? What classes are you taking in school? Why is it that kids that want to go on, and this is most of the case, studies say that kids go to school that want to be a doctor, they know that they want to be a doctor before their freshman year. It's not something that they say, hey, you know what, my junior year of college, maybe I'm going to go into medicine. No. This is something they always want to do. Why not get them started right away? Why are we forcing them to take all of these other liberal arts classes, stuff? Hey, I'm not saying that knowledge isn't a wonderful thing. And knowing various different, it's great, man. It's fantastic to have as much knowledge as you possibly can. That's great. But in today's day and age, you can garner that knowledge very easily. You go to Amazon, order a book. You can go to your phone. You can take a class somewhere. Colleges and universities, in many respects, are teaching hobbies. The purpose should be to get people an education so they can get themselves a job. Hey, unless, of course, again, if you're a trust fund kid and you want to go to college and you want to study gender studies or something else that's not going to put any coin in your pocket, that's fine. But those things, you shouldn't be allowing kids to go into debt to get those degrees. And they're allowed to go into debt to get those degrees because guess what? The taxpayer is backing the loan. Would you allow a kid to go out who doesn't have a job, who has no assets, to go out and get a loan to purchase a Ferrari? No, you wouldn't. Oh, they would if the kid could default on the loan and the taxpayer would cover it. And again, it comes down to where the pain is. And oftentimes what we see here in this country is what? The powers that be, the people in Washington, D.C., they don't care. They give away the free stuff and they put it on our backs. Have a wonderful day, everybody. Watchdog on WallStreet.com. Watchdog on wallstreet.com. Our newsletter, consultations with our certified financial planners. All sorts of great things there at the website, Watchdog on wallstreet.com. You can also give us a call, 800-471-5984. That number again, 800-471-5984.